Hill Cheryl. I am the Livestock Extension Agent with CTAR. Today we're here at the Meilani Research Station and we're going to talk a little bit about body condition scoring in your beef herd. Body condition scores describe the relative fatness of your cow or beef animal using a 9-point scoring system. Using this system, you can apply the score if to the animal out in the field or pasture, and animals don't need to be brought into a processing area. So this is very useful for a producer, which they can use this body condition scoring method to identify the nutritional status or evaluate the nutritional status of their herd out in the field. So it does take a little bit of practice in order to get comfortable doing body condition scores and to be consistent on your body condition scores. So anytime you bring your herd into your processing unit or chutes, it's always a good idea to go ahead and do a visual appraisal on them and then a physical appraisal, and being able to palpate these particular key areas on the animal that you evaluate in the field to do a body condition score. So as I said, your body condition score talks about relative fatness in the animal. So why is this important? So fat is your energy stores for your animals. So if an animal becomes nutritionally stressed, or they in a time when forages is limited or in poor quality, these animals can pull from these nutritional storages or these energy storages in their body. Another time when it's important is when the animals have a high nutritional demand, such as when they're in late gestation or peak lactation period. These animals can use those energy or fat stores to meet those nutritional demands during that period. So I spoke a little bit about relative fatness and the body conditioning scores, and we talked about how fat equals energy for the animal. They can use this energy when the animals are nutritionally stressed, and or they have a great increase in nutritional demand for the animals. So now, how does that body conditioning score relate to the animal's relative fatness? It equals a percentage of body fat within that animal. So, for example, an animal with a body condition score of 3 would have about 11% of body fat, as compared to one that's in a body condition score of 6 would have anywhere to about 23% of body fat. So you can see there's a great difference between these animals, and animals that are in a little bit of better condition when going into a time of nutritional stress, such as when we have drought, or if the animals are in a reproductive herd and they're going to go into late gestation or peak lactation periods or get ready for breeding. It's important that these animals have these energy reserves to pull from so that they can maintain themselves and go into their reproductive processes as they need to be and maintain their body condition. Particularly in your heifers, this is really important because they're continuing to grow. So if they just had their first calf, now they're growing, they're raising the calf on their side, and they're healing their body. So that's a big demand nutritionally on that animal. So having them in that better body condition score just helps them along and continues so that they can be reproductively efficient. So a general rule of thumb is that there's about 75 pounds between each body condition score. So what does that mean for the animal? If they are in a body condition score of 4, weighing about 1,100 pounds, they'll need to gain 75 pounds to get to the next body condition score. You can take that back and divide it about whatever their average daily gain. If it's 2 pounds a day, it'll take them approximately 38 days to reach that 1,175 pounds. That just gets you set up so that you can manage your breeding herd if you need to adjust nutritional supplements for them to make sure that they're in the body condition scores that you want them to be when they're going in for breeding or coming into calving season. So understanding body condition scores and you can use them very well in your management system, and they can be a very useful tool for you out there. So how does a 9-point scoring system work, and how do you apply those body conditions using that system out in the pasture field? The 9-point scoring system ranges from a body condition score 1 to body condition score 9. Body condition score 1 animals will be very thin, emaciated, and weak. They'll be devoid of any visible fat on any of the key areas and have little to no muscling, particularly in their hindquarters. If palpated, these animals on the key areas, the bony structures of the ribs, the hips, the pins, the top line or the back and spinous processes are usually very sharp to the touch and very visible to the eye. Whereas on the other end of the body condition scoring spectrum, a body condition score 9 animal will have considerable amount of fat cover over all the key areas and will typically have other fat patches that have accumulated in other areas on the body. They can appear very boxy in appearance and may be considered obese to some. They could have a flat top on their back typically, and sometimes their mobility will be impaired due to this high level of fat cover over the multiple points on this animal's body. So how does a 9-point scoring system work, and how do you apply those body conditions using that system out in the pasture field? The 9-point scoring system ranges from a body condition score 1 to body condition score 9. Body condition score 1 animals will be very thin, emaciated, and weak. They'll be devoid of any visible fat on any of the key areas and have little to no muscling, particularly in their hindquarters. If palpated, these animals on the key areas, the bony structures of the ribs, the hips, the pins, the top line or the back and spinous processes are usually very sharp to the touch and very visible to the eye. Whereas on the other end of the body condition scoring spectrum, a body condition score 9 animal will have considerable amount of fat cover over all the key areas and will typically have other fat patches that have accumulated in other areas on the body. They can appear very boxy in appearance and may be considered obese to some. They could have a flat top on their back typically, and sometimes their mobility will be impaired due to this high level of fat cover over the multiple points on this animal's body. So as I mentioned, there's key areas that you want to visually inspect on the animal when you're applying a body condition score in the pasture field. These key areas are your ribs, your back, your hooks, pins, and the tail head, and the brisket of the animal. If you can get these animals to move, it helps to better visualize the fat cover in these areas, and always make sure you address the animal from both the right or left side. This is because the rumen sits on the left side of the animal, and you don't want the fill or emptiness of that rumen to impact your body condition score. You need to also take into account the amount of muscle or hair coat that the animals have. During the colder parts of the year, it'll get thicker, and you don't want that to impact your score as well. Other things could be your stage of pregnancy for the animal, or if they have been in a corral being worked or trailed for a while, they can be dehydrated, and that could impact the key areas that you are evaluating and how they appear. So keep in mind that those kinds of things will impact or could impact your visual appraisal and applying these body condition scores to the animals. So always best to do them out in the field when the animals have not yet been handled and are just kind of in the calm and resting area. When you do your body condition scores out in the field, it'll help to eliminate these other factors from impacting your body condition score. So when you look at those key areas of the animal, you want to identify the amount of fat cover over these areas and if any of the bony structures are visible to the eye. Animals tend to lay down fat or finish, remember, from the top down and from the front to back. So areas such as the foreribs will likely have your fat cover before you say your 12th or 13th rib, and top definitely will have your back, your fat cover or finish laying down before your areas in your flanks or in the brisket. So remember that when you are doing your body condition scoring, so that's what you would use to appraise the animal and apply a score. This particular animal here, you can see that the foreribs are not quite visible. I don't see a 12 or 13 rib unless this animal is on the move. His top of his back's got pretty nice, good fat cover over there. I don't see any bony structures visible to the eye. His spinous processes and hips are pretty well covered. The pins are getting covered, and he's got some fat over his tail head, and hindquarters are full. So he has some fat in his brisket, but still has a little bit of ways to go before he'll be completely finished. And I would probably place this deer in a body condition score 5 or 6. And, you know, it's so subjective because everybody will have a little bit different eye on the animal. So just being consistent with your body condition scores, and if you're measuring the herd, that's the most important thing, is that you are consistent in how you apply the score to the particular animal or herd that you're working on. Because every person, when they do a body condition score, is going to be a little bit different. And and you all may have a different opinion about this animal individually right now. So like I said, it's important that you understand the key areas that you look at when you apply a body condition score and what you're identifying in those key areas to apply that score to that particular animal. So if body condition scoring is new to you, you can focus on just separating your herds or the animals that you're looking at into three different groups: thin group, moderate, and then your fat or fleshy group. And then if you want to go back into those each individual groups and assign an individual score to those to each particular animal, then you can go ahead and do that. The differences between the body condition scores of 1, 2, and 3 are sometimes very slight or subtle. So when you have the whole group together, it can kind of help you be able to sort those out a little bit easier when you're first starting to get used to doing body condition scores, and it'll help you just become more consistent and confident in the scores that you assign these animals. It's another management or practice tool that you can use as well in your herds to just separate them in this manner to be able to better manage them if you need to apply supplements or whatnot to a particular herd in preparation for whatever their production goal is, whether it be for market or as a reproductive herd. So it's a quick way to apply a body condition score to a group of animals, and then you can later on go back and further assess them and apply individual scores to each particular animal. So we can go ahead and move on now and look at what each individual scored animal would look like, or the structures and what you would look for in each different body condition score. So, of course, we're going to start with our body condition score 1 animal. So, as we look at these different key features, the particular difference between this animal and a body condition score 2 or 3 animal is that body condition scored 1 animals typically are weak. They will have muscle loss in their hindquarters or around the body in those key areas. As you can see, the spine's very visible, the bony structures of the ribs from the fore to the hind ribs, the transverse processes, all very visible to the eye. No fat in the brisket or flank areas, and hip bones are very visible on this animal here. So body condition score 2 animal then may not appear physically weak, but you will still see these bony structures as far as the back and the hips and the pin bones. Your tail will be very noticeable, and those different bony structures within it. The fore and the hind ribs will all be able to be very visible to the eye, and those spaces on your spinous processes will be very sharp to the touch and maybe easily visible to the eye. And again, these animals will have probably no fat within their brisket or flanks. So body condition score 3 animal now will have a little bit more fat cover, or some fat cover, over the back, loin, and foreribs. You may see the foreribs slightly disappear on this animal, and you can see that they'll start to have a little bit of muscling going to come in on the hindquarters and over some other key areas of the body, and some fat in those other areas as well. So now we move into our moderate group of animals and a body condition score 4. Some people place this animal right on the borderline, but I think it's good to be grouped together as a moderate group and work them in that way. Their foreribs will be slightly noticeable. 12th or 13th ribs will be very visible still to the eye. But again, these animals are not weak. They may have some slight muscle loss in the hindquarters, but not anywhere near as much as the body condition scores 1 to 3. Spinous processes could be felt with very, very light palpation, and they'll probably be more rounded as compared to sharp as they feel in the thinner animals. And as I mentioned, very minimal muscle loss in the hindquarters. So body condition score 5 animals then will have 12 or 13 ribs that are not visible unless the animal's been shrunk or working in a corral. They could have those 12 or 13 ribs visible, and sometimes when on a move, you'll be able to see that 12 or 13 rib as well. But firm pressure is needed to feel that transverse process. You can see the back is starting to flat out. They've got more fat cover in that area. On the foreribs, they've got fat laid down, and around the tail head will start to fill up. These animals may still not have any fat in their brisket, though, in a body condition score of 5. Animals that are in a body condition score of 6 will have ribs that are fully covered. Hindquarters will be nice and full and plump, and their spongy fat noticeable around their tail head starting to form. Foreribs on both sides of the body also may have that spongy fat there. And these animals may have some fat in their brisket as well as in their flanks. Body condition score 7. Animals need to have firm pressure in order to feel these spinaceous processes on their top or back. Spaces are no longer distinguishable on a visual inspection and very difficult to feel even with the firm pressure during palpation. You can see that they have abundant fat cover on both sides of the tail head and over the foreribs and the hind ribs over that transverse processes, and hips and pins are nicely covered. They've got brisket that's getting really full there. So you can see this animal has a lot more fat put on him. Body condition 8 is where the animals kind of start to turn into this more blocky appearance, and it's a lot more noticeable. Bone structures will not be very visible to the eye, and the fat cover over these animals will be very spongy to the touch, and they could start to have to see some of those patchy areas or patchy fatty areas that become visible to the eye when they reach into this body condition score of 8. The brisket at this point is typically very full, and the hips and pins are no longer visible to the eye. So body condition score 9, as you can see, this animal has a tail head that's buried in her fat, abundant fat cover all over, and there's patchy fat areas around the animal. Mobility may be affected, and I remember this cow, she actually had a really hard time getting up from where she was, but was afraid of us enough to get up and try to run. But anyway, she has a lot of fat cover all over her. You can't see her brisket too well in this picture, but it was very full. So she is a body condition score of 9. So on the complete other extreme of your body condition scores. So once now that you understand how to do your body condition score and you've seen all of this, when is the best time to apply them? It really depends, I think, on your herd, but really anytime you go out and then visit your herd is always a good time to do a visual appraisal of them. You do it anyways to check for health. So do a quick one to look at body condition score, especially if you're new at it, then it just gets you to be more consistent and confident in doing those body condition scores in the pasture and applying them to your herd. For your breeding herd, you definitely want to be evaluating them in the late summer, fall. 90 days pre-calving, as I mentioned, is 75 pounds between each body condition score. So make sure that you're giving yourself enough time for those animals. If they're gaining that 2 pounds a day, you're still going to need at least 30 or 40 days to about 40 days in order for you to move them up into a body condition score. So if you have even lower average daily gain than 2 pounds per day, you're going to need those extra days before calving to make sure that you got your cows into or your heifers into a good body condition score. Definitely they should be done at calving, at weaning, post 45 days post weaning as well, and then again at breeding. If you're only doing body condition scores at breeding, that's you're way behind on the game, and you should be doing them a lot sooner than that to make sure these animals are coming into in a good condition for breeding. Why is that so important? I think you increase animals have been found that if they're in a body condition score of 5, 6, or even 7 going into calving or even going out of weaning, these animals return, their postpartum interval is a lot shorter, so they return to estrus a lot quicker and they get to be rebred. So their pregnancy rate just goes up from a body condition scored animal at 3, where you get about 50 to 60% pregnancy rate, you increase that to about 80 to 90%, bringing them up into a body condition score of 5, 6, or 7. Particularly in your heifers, first time heifers are very important. They're still growing, they're raising that calf on her side, and now they're repairing themselves and getting ready to go back into estrus to be bred again. So it's a lot of demand nutritionally on that animal. So making sure that they are in a good body condition score will set her up to be more reproductively efficient. And your grass finish or market herds, throughout your finishing period definitely is when you want to do your body condition scores and get on a consistent schedule every time you got to move those animals, making sure you're doing that and just giving them an assessment. And if you don't want to or don't have the time to
do a full assessment of every single animal, at least look over and make sure that you've identified if you've got thin or whatnot once in there, and use that to help manage that herd better. You can also do body condition scores, 30 to 60 days pre-travel if you know the animals are going to be stressed on a travel, and putting a little bit more condition on them just helps them push through and get out to their destination in a little bit better condition.
So we're going to switch gears here a little bit and talk about frame scores in your beef herd. So what are frame scores? Frame scores is a method that you can use to estimate the skeletal size of your animal. They are approved by the Beef Improvement Federation and is based off a measurement of the hip heights in an animal. So if we look here at this animal, he's standing nice and square for us. You want to take a hip height measurement using either a measuring stick or a device that's developed by some of the livestock supply companies. Measure this animal from the hip at the top line down to the ground. And you take that measurement then and it's plugged into a formula either for heifers or steers, and you take the age of the animal and then it gives you a score for that particular animal. Using the Beef Improvement Federation chart, there's some standard scores that you are already calculated out, or you can do those calculations if you're in a different age, based on what's already on the chart. So what does that frame score then tell us about the frame size of the animal? So based on the frame score, you can then put these animals into different frame size, small, medium, or large. Small animals are typically in the frame scores of 2 or 3. Mediums are usually your 4 to 5 frame sized animals, and then anything above that 5 is typically considered large. So this group of animals standing here, I think, except for maybe the Hereford, are all large framed animals. They're both some steers and heifers right here. So you can see that there's even a difference between the gender of heifer or steer. And even though they're all large framed animals, these animals are going to take a little bit longer to finish. So frame size is a way you can project weight after finishing or when the animals are finished. So for example, a small or medium framed animal, which is a frame score of 4 or 5, typically finishes about 11 to 1,250 pounds. If they are finished at that rate, what that tells you is that that animal at that frame size, when it's at that weight, will then have a fat cover over the 12th rib of that half an inch, which is what is related back to having good marbling in the animal, fat cover around the animal, and just improves the meat quality of that animal. So if you have a smaller framed animal that are going to have a less than 11, they're going to project out to be less than 1,100 pounds when they're finished. So this animal is here, this number 68. I'm not sure if you can see her number, but number 60, these two right here, you can see are small framed animals in this herd. So you can see that you can't see them side by side too much with the other ones, but these girls here are in a small frame. So they'll probably finish out a little bit better. This 25 is another one that's another small framed animal. So they are just of a smaller frame size. Their projected weight when they're finished is going to be a little bit lighter, probably than the 1,100 pounds. So how does this apply into your herds, especially in market or grass finished herds? It's important for you to understand frame size or frame scores, and it can help you to manage those herds by putting these animals of similar frame scores together. You can then project out when they should be ready and finished for slaughter, and use your body condition scores in between those periods, from when they first go out to when you're projecting them to be finished, to make sure that they're meeting their nutritional statuses, and gaining their finish at that time. So it's a useful tool to help manage your herds, and can be used to separate them in that order to be able to help you manage the labor that needs to be with each different herd, and get those animals into the finishing weights that they need to be to have a good carcass on them, as well as improve that meat quality for those animals. So that's another useful tool then that you can use with your beef herds, and you can also use this with your breeding herds, because understanding your frame size in selecting new heifer replacements is also going to be very important. And it all depends on what the frame size that you want for your animal depends on what the production goal of the herd that she's going to go into. So if she's going into a grass finished herd and she's producing stock for that herd, then you might have a different frame size that you want to use for that heifer, or depending on the bull or
whatnot that you're using, those genetics is all going to dictate. So understanding the frame size of the animal then can be used to help you better adjust your herds or select your animals for the different herds that you have within your own production system and the goals that you intend for those herds.
I hope you found this video useful and some of these tools be useful for your management strategies on your farm or your ranch. If you have any questions, please go ahead and reach out to myself or any of your livestock agents within your county, and we'll be more than happy to help answer some questions about body condition scores or frame size or frame scores in your beef herd. So mahalo for watching. Ahui ho.